Do you believe Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor are getting a fair trial?
One of the challenges around the lack of transparency on that process is it becomes extremely difficult to make judgments around whether or not the trial was fair.
I think there's one simple reason why the two Canadians, Michael Spavor and Michael Kovrig, the two Michaels, as we've come to know them, have languished in a horrific Chinese prison for nearly 2.5 years on trumped-up espionage charges. And the reason for that is the Trudeau government's softness toward China. From the beginning, right after the two Michaels were arrested, and of course they were arrested in retaliation for us detaining Meng Wanzhou, the Huawei executive who sought by the Americans for violating their trade laws. Right after we detained her at Vancouver Airport, the Chinese arrested a former Canadian diplomat and a Canadian businessman, put them in jail, and have left them there ever since, with very little contact with our diplomats, very little contact with their families, very little contact with legal advisors. They did that in retaliation for us detaining Meng Wanzhou. And from the beginning, the Trudeau government has been very soft in its response. It didn't file strong diplomatic objections to the Michaels being arrested. And the Prime Minister has never, I think, not certainly in my opinion, has the Prime Minister made a strong denunciation of the Chinese tactics. Even just last week, before the two Michaels trials began, Trudeau said, "Oh, that's not the way we would do it in Canada." Isn't that special? If you were languishing in a foreign prison under horrible conditions, wouldn't you want the Prime Minister to say something like, "Let them out, or we're going to start taking serious action against you"? Now, granted, we're a small country, they're a big country. They have a huge military, we have a smaller military. It's not like we're going to invade them. It's not like we're going to start a trade war with China. But there are things we can do. One of the things that you noticed outside of the two Michaels trials is a lot of diplomats from other countries, at our invitation, came and stood witness. Now, they weren't allowed inside. No one's allowed in. They're closed-door trials, secret trials. Remind me of the old Soviet secret trials. But at least we had a lot of diplomats there from other countries, from Australia, from the United States, from the UK, from the Netherlands, from the Czech Republic. They all came and they showed that they are watching. And the Chinese don't like to lose face on things like that. So it's possible that will have some impact. That's the sort of thing we should have done 2 years ago, and we didn't. The Trudeau government, though, is soft on China on a whole number of issues. The source of the pandemic was in China. For months before putting in a travel ban against people coming from China, the Trudeau government had focused instead on making sure that no Canadians said nasty things about China because of the pandemic. They were much more interested in being woke on racial issues than they were on protecting the public from the pandemic. We put all of our vaccine eggs in a Chinese basket, and now we're 3 or 4 months behind much of the rest of the developed world in getting vaccines. We invited the Chinese to come do military training with Canadian forces while the two Michaels were in jail. And now, of course, we're considering sending our Olympic teams to the Winter Olympics next year in Beijing, while the two Michaels are still in jail. In fact, there are 119 Canadians in Chinese detention right now. Many of them who were born in China became naturalized Canadians, but they're still very much Canadian citizens. There's 119 of them in Chinese detention, mostly for religious and political reasons. And the Trudeau government does nothing more for them than it hasn't done for the two Michaels. I'm Lorne Gunter for Postmedia.